So, I've been doing this thing lately where I stay up way too late reading financial advice online, and most of it just makes me feel worse about myself. Like last Tuesday, I was sitting in my apartment eating instant noodles, scrolling through some financial guru's content, and he's talking about how I need to stop buying coffee to get rich. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, I haven't bought coffee out in 3 weeks. That's not my problem. Something else is going on. And I genuinely could not figure out what it was. That question sent me down a rabbit hole that I want to talk through with you today because what I found was kind of uncomfortable. Here's the thing nobody told me. There's a whole category of financial traps that are specifically designed to catch people who are trying to do everything right. Not people blowing money on vacations or designer stuff. People like me who are genuinely trying to build a better financial situation but keep ending up in the same place. They're called middle class traps, and once I started learning about them, I couldn't stop seeing them everywhere, including in my own life. Before I get into it, I just want to be clear about who I am. I'm not a financial expert. I don't have a degree in economics or accounting. I'm someone who's genuinely starting from nearly zero, trying to understand how money works because nobody ever actually taught me. So take everything I say here as me thinking out loud, not as advice. Let me start with the one that hit me the hardest because it explains something I've been confused about for 2 years now. Lifestyle creep. I first heard this term and honestly thought it sounded made up, but here's what it actually describes. Imagine you've been scraping by and then you get a raise or a better job. Your income goes up, you feel good, you treat yourself to a slightly nicer apartment, you upgrade your phone plan, you start eating out once or twice a week because you've earned it. None of those decisions feel reckless. Each one feels completely reasonable given your new income. But by the end of the month, you've got almost the same amount left over as before the raise, maybe less. And you're standing there confused, wondering where the money went. That's lifestyle creep. Your spending expanded quietly to match your income. And the terrifying part is that it doesn't feel like a mistake while it's happening. It feels like progress. It feels like you're finally living the life you were supposed to live. But financially, you're standing in the exact same place you were before. I actually experienced this in a small way last year. I picked up extra hours at work for a few months, and within like 6 weeks I had signed up for 2 new subscriptions, started buying better groceries, and was going out an extra time per week. When the extra hours stopped, I felt like I'd taken a pay cut even though I was back to my normal income. That was lifestyle creep doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The insight here is something I had to sit with for a while. More income doesn't automatically create more freedom. Freedom only exists in the gap between what you earn and what you spend. If your spending always rises to meet your income, that gap never grows, and you never actually get ahead. Now here's where I started getting a little skeptical of myself because I know the response to this is usually something like, well, just don't spend more when you earn more. And yeah, obviously. But that advice doesn't account for how normal it feels when you're doing it. There's no alarm that goes off. Nobody tells you you're falling into a trap. It just feels like living your life. So when I think about applying this to my actual situation, the thing I'm taking away is not some dramatic budgeting overhaul. It's more like the next time my income goes up, I want to make a deliberate decision about where that extra money goes before it just disappears. Even if it's a small amount, even if it's just an extra $30 a month going somewhere intentional. Okay, let me talk about something that I genuinely didn't understand until recently, and it involves credit cards. I think most people my age know that carrying a balance on a credit card isn't great, but I don't think most of us understand how not great it actually is. There's this thing called the minimum payment illusion, and it works because credit card companies are very good at making the minimum payment feel like the responsible choice. Here's what's actually happening. Say you owe a couple $1,000s. Your statement shows a minimum payment of maybe $50 or $60. That feels manageable. You pay it, you feel like you handled it, but a huge chunk of that payment goes directly to interest, not to the actual balance you owe. The amount you actually owe barely changes. And next month, interest builds on nearly the full amount again. I looked up what this actually means in practice, and it's genuinely shocking. A couple $1,000s in credit card debt paid at the minimum can take over a decade to pay off, and by the end, you've paid nearly double what you originally borrowed. That's not a small detail. That's a massive amount of money, disappearing into a system specifically designed to keep you paying forever. The thing that got me is that minimum payments aren't designed to help you. They're designed to help the credit card company. That's the whole point of them. You pay just enough to feel okay about the situation while the actual debt grows in the background. I don't have a huge amount of credit card debt right now, but I have some. And this realization made me look at it completely differently. I used to think about it as just a number I deal with eventually. Now I understand that every month I'm only paying the minimum. I'm essentially choosing to pay more than I need to in the long run, which, when I'm starting from nearly nothing, I really cannot afford to do. There's another trap I want to talk about that I think is especially sneaky because it's not about spending at all. It's about convenience. Every single purchase you make for the sake of convenience feels completely justifiable in the moment. You're tired. You're busy. $7 for delivery instead of cooking seems totally fine. A premium subscription for an app you use occasionally? Sure. Express shipping because you don't want to wait. Why not? 12 different streaming services because each one is only $10, obviously. But here's the thing, none of those feel expensive individually. Together, they can pull thousands of dollars out of your annual income before you've even noticed. I actually did a rough count of my monthly subscriptions about 2 months ago, and I genuinely had not looked at some of them in over a year. They were just quietly pulling money out of my account every month while I wasn't paying attention. This isn't about eliminating every small convenience from your life. That would be miserable and also probably unsustainable. It's more about the idea of convenience as the default. When you reach for your wallet automatically every time something feels slightly inconvenient, it adds up in a way that's genuinely hard to see until you step back and look at the whole picture. The way I think about this now is that convenience spending isn't always wrong, but it should be a choice, not a reflex. Now, I want to get into something that I think is really psychologically interesting because it goes beyond just spending habits. This is the one about appearances. There's a pattern a lot of people fall into where they spend money not because they want the thing, but because of what they think the thing says about them. Nicer clothes for events, expensive dinners in places where people can see you, vacations posted on social media, everything financed by debt, all for an audience that honestly isn't paying as much attention as you think. I want to be honest here. I have absolutely done this. Not in a huge dramatic way, but there have definitely been times where I agreed to go somewhere or buy something, not because I genuinely wanted to, but because I was worried what saying no would look like. And the uncomfortable truth is that most of the time, nobody actually remembers. The people you're trying to impress are usually too busy managing their own financial image to notice yours. What I find really interesting about this one is that it's not just about vanity. It's connected to a deeper thing about social comparison and how we measure our own progress. When you feel like everyone around you is doing better financially, it creates this pressure to keep up, even when keeping up is actively hurting your situation. And the internet makes this about 1,000 times worse because you're not just comparing yourself to the people you actually know. You're comparing yourself to carefully curated highlights of strangers' lives. The trap here is spending real money on debt to maintain a perception that mostly exists in your own head. Here's the insight that I think ties a lot of these together. All of these traps share something in common. None of them feel like traps when you're in them. They feel normal. Lifestyle creep feels like reward. Minimum payments feel like responsibility. Convenience spending feels like taking care of yourself. Keeping up appearances feels like participation. The trap is designed to feel like the right thing to do. And I think that's why standard financial advice so often fails people who are starting from where I'm starting. The advice usually assumes you already know which normal feeling things are actually problems. If nobody ever taught you how money works, you just navigate by what feels reasonable. And what feels reasonable is often exactly what these systems want you to do. The bigger picture thing I'm starting to understand is that getting ahead financially isn't just about earning more. It's about creating a gap and protecting it. Every one of these traps is essentially a different way to close that gap before you ever get to use it. So what am I actually doing with any of this? Honestly, I'm starting small because that's the only realistic option right now. I went through my subscriptions and canceled 3 I wasn't using. I made a decision that the next time my income increases, even a little, I'm going to put at least half of that increase somewhere intentional before I adjust my lifestyle. I'm paying more than the minimum on my credit card, even when it's only a little bit more, because now I understand what those minimum payments actually mean over time. I'm not doing any of this perfectly. I still make choices I probably shouldn't, but I think the most useful thing I've gotten from going down this rabbit hole is a different way of looking at ordinary financial decisions. Not every purchase is a trap, but some of the most normal seeming ones actually are. There's one more area I want to dig into in a future video that I think connects to all of this in a really interesting way. It's the idea that some of the most common financial advice out there, the stuff that sounds completely responsible and grown up, might actually be building a situation where you have a lot of money on paper, but can't actually access it when you need it. It's sometimes called the middle class trap in a different sense, the one where you're doing everything quote right and still feel financially stuck. I've been reading a lot about it, and I have some thoughts I want to work through, so that's where I'm heading next. If you made it this far, thank you. This is me genuinely trying to figure this stuff out, and it means a lot to have people along for that process. If any of this hit close to home for you, drop it in the comments, because honestly, I'd love to know if I'm the only one who had no idea about some of this stuff until embarrassingly recently. I'll see you in the next one.